A Nebraska Supreme Court opinion rules the murder case of a woman in Fort Calhoun can now proceed to trial. William Collins is accused of murdering 71-year-old Linda Childers. Records show Collins argued his case should be thrown out because of delays to his right for a speedy trial. The Nebraska Supreme Court disagreed, stating the postponements of arraignment were in part, quote, periods of delay resulting from continuances granted at the request of the defendant.
It was mid-August of 2023 when authorities found Childers dead in Fort Calhoun. They later arrested Collins in Galveston County, Texas on unrelated charges, extraditing him to Nebraska a month later. We checked court records this afternoon. Right now, there is not a future trial date set.